Jonathan gets amnesia, and Jennifer kind of likes it. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about, this is our third sort of married couple solving mystery show.
Ooh, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right.
And it's come up in both of the other ones being Tucker's Witch and McMillan and Wife. But this is Hart to Hart from the 80s.
And I think you could draw probably a more direct line from Hart to some of the other ones that came after it. McMillan and Wife was influential in its way, but I think Hart to Hart probably had a more direct influence on some of the other ones. And like, Remington Steele, not necessarily married couples, but Remington Steele, Moonlighting, etc., those kind of shows.
And it's also the glamour thing. Lifestyles of the rich and famous of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this was the first show to really, besides, I guess Dallas started in the late 70s, right?
Yes, Dallas started just before this, but this prefigured Dynasty, which is kind of an easy comparison to make because, it's Aaron Spelling's show, and you see prominent in the credits, Nolan Miller, was kind of like the in-house costume designer for Aaron Spelling at a certain point, and he, I guess, became known in his own right, I think, for Dynasty, but apparently had a big part in this show, which has many costume changes in a given episode.
Yes, it does. Yeah. And a show I never watched as a kid. I think it was on probably too late, but I certainly remember seeing commercials for it.
Yes, me too. It looks like it was mostly like a Tuesday night late show, and I think we probably would have seen a lot of promotion for it, especially during like Happy Days and Three's Company, shows that were on the same night. I didn't really watch it either. I seem to be aware of it. It seems like it was a show that I want to say that my grandmother watched. So I sort of remember like older people talking about it, but I don't think I really watched it much, and nor did I think I watched it much in reruns. I know I've seen episodes here and there over the years, but yeah, to me, it was kind of like really diving into it for the podcast here. It was kind of my first real prolonged exposure to it.
Yeah. I don't even remember it being on in reruns. I'm sure it was, but maybe I just wasn't interested.
Yeah, well, I've got my 11 Alive WPIX t-shirt on today because I believe Channel 11 did show it at some point. I think one of the New York stations at least showed it in reruns. And I think in the 90s, when FX first started, and it was showing a lot of old reruns as kind of its core, I think maybe it had Hart to Hart pretty early on and for a while there on FX. And then in recent years, it seems to have become more of a staple on like the Diginets, and I think Ovation Cable Network picked it up, which, is interesting, but never like it just seems like one of those shows that people know about, but I didn't really know that a lot of people actually watched it until, maybe a couple of years ago. Because of one person in particular, one of our friend that we'll talk about. And I was sort of fascinated by the fact that somebody did watch it, and I became more interested in it. And actually, I will say, I think before we locked it in for this season here, it hit Prime Video, and that was kind of like the excuse I needed to, okay, it's on Amazon Prime and without commercials, and I, kind of started watching a few episodes that way.
Mm-hmm. And, I feel like you're a bit of an Aaron Spelling aficionado, so...
Yeah, I've often people have often said that about me. Yes.
Yeah. So it seems like this was a gap in your Aaron Spelling watching.
Yeah, when I really need to correct.
Yeah.
Otherwise I might be bumped down to just an Aaron Spelling. I don't know, an Aaron Spelling casual viewer or Aaron Spelling aware. Aaron Spelling conscious. Can I be any of those things? Aficionado puts a little bit of a pressure on me.
I'm sure, like a true aficionado, of course, would have later watched Melrose Place. I don't know, whatever else he had on.
Models Inc.
In that era, Models.
Yes, you are talking to somebody that I will share with our listeners here that recently read Aaron Spelling's autobiography.
So I feel like it was Robert Wagner, or RJ as you like to call him.
As I like to call him?
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently everyone likes to call him that.
I think I'd like to be called RT from now on.
RT? Okay.
Yes, of course, my middle name is longtime listeners know is Tiberius, of course. So
Of course. Yeah. But like he and Stephanie Powers were probably on Battle of the Network stars, right?
boy, I don't have a specific memory of that, but they would have had to have been.
I feel like he would have wanted to show off his athleticism.
Yeah, well, Stephanie Powers, I believe, is a big polo player.
Yeah.
I don't remember them having a polo competition on Battle of the Network stars, though.
No, it would have been something to see. Probably the insurance was too high.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
And they would have had a lot of actors like saying, "Yeah, sure, I can ride a horse," and then they really couldn't.
yeah. Which classic Hollywood circumstance, right? Everybody says they can ride a horse.
Right. So I remember being aware of them. I guess, and I don't know if it was because of the show. I think some of it was when Natalie Wood died, being aware of Robert Wagner because of that, and seeing adults react to that. And then I admit I was confused, like when he later married Jill St. John.
Yeah,
I thought she was Stephanie Powers.
right.
Like, oh, okay, he married. Well, that's interesting, but that wasn't the case. And then, I was reading about her today. I didn't realize, that she had been involved with William Holden when he died in the same year. So
Right.
because I do feel like they, especially Robert Wagner, but they both do have this. They're like connected to old Hollywood. I guess because they started in the studio system. It just seems like I'm casting aspersions in Robert Wagner for no reason, but they like that. That's the kind of persona he put across on this show in public too.
I think that's pretty astute, actually, and I don't know if he necessarily would shy away from that.
Although I guess he came from humble beginnings. And Stephanie Powers grew up in Hollywood went to Hollywood High, knew Tom Mankiewicz growing up, so she really is in a way more connected.
Yeah, and did you know that her, Natalie Wood, and Jill St. John were all like in the same like ballet or dance class when they were very young?
I didn't know that.
Like,
no.
there's my lovely wife of the show, Lori, unearthed that fact the other day, and as I was watching an interview clip with Stephanie Powers where they showed a photo of the three of them together, which is kind of odd, like you said, the Jill St. John, Stephanie Powers thing. It's almost like Patrick Simmons and Gary Sandy, or Michael Learned and Michael Lerner.
Yeah.
A lot of people have troubles keeping them apart.
And wasn't Jill St. John in the pilot movie for this?
Yes. And, though, getting back to something you had said a minute ago about sort of being aware of them, for one, unfortunately, I don't remember them being in any of the ABC promos we've talked about, which, I don't mean to contradict your statement, though, but I'm just saying I wish they would have been in those, like up in a hot air balloon or something, or dancing, doing a little soft shoe. But it would make sense that we would see them because, or at least in some form, promoting the show, promoting ABC, because they're great together and they're great representatives for the show and for the network. This morning I was watching a few old clips I'll put in the playlist of them on, like, Good Morning America. It seems like, and just, they're very natural in that kind of form. And they have such a good off-screen chemistry together, too, that I can see people being confused and thinking that they were really married, actually.
We know audiences sometimes do that.
Yes. Like, what, the same thing happened on Hardcastle and McCormick. Everybody assumed they were married, and
Right.
it just wasn't the case,
They did bicker like a old married couple.
Yes.
So, and you know what else? Besides Heart to Heart, I've only seen Robert Wagner Austin Power movies.
Interesting. He's number 2, I believe, right?
Number 2, yes. And he's quite good in those, playing against type. But I really don't have a big impression of, or a full impression of him.
Well, it's interesting because, when talking, the producers and Aaron Spelling have talked about, their ideal choice for this show would be somebody like Cary Grant. And Robert Wagner, was somebody who they came up with. And they kind of acknowledge, well, he's not Cary Grant. But Cary Grant was, I think, like 75 at the time the show was made and had been retired for years. But one of the episodes I watched had Robert Wagner sort of doing a sort of, amateur Cary Grant impersonation a little bit. And he seems to have been inspired by him. And that's how he was trying to play it. But he was in 2 other shows, that had respectable runs where he was kind of sort of bringing like a bit of charisma and suaveness, like It Takes a Thief, and then Switch in the mid-'70s. So he had like 2 moderate hits, I'd say, before Heart to Heart, where he was sort of like working on or maybe building on that persona that he, kind of established as a youngster in Hollywood. And this show might be arguably his peak. I mean, it's just kind of like this character might have been, kind of what he was working up to that whole time.
Now, I gotta say, I find him a little bit bland. But in the episode we're going to talk about, I think is one of his finer moments.
Yeah.
I guess because he's playing all cool.
Right.
Kind of wisecracks, but wisecracks in kind of this voice.
Yes.
Maybe not a typical wisecracky voice. I think they're good together. I find Stephanie Powers more charismatic than he is.
Interesting.
But of course, none of them are as charismatic as Lionel Stander. So.
Well, no. No, I think we will agree on that one.
Yeah, who's the third leg, unless we count Freeway as another. Make it a four-legged stool. But yeah, as Max. And I'm going to propose to you, based on reading about his background, and of course we'd already talked about the backgrounds of some of the people on Night Court, a baddie category for most interesting life.
I am intrigued by that suggestion.
Because, I didn't know anything about him. I just thought he was some unique old actor. But he had this history with the blacklist and making uproarious comments at when he was being questioned.
Yeah.
And just very unexpected. Also, he was in a movie with Fatty Arbuckle and Shemp.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm imagining his face and Shemp's face in the same movie. And that's quite a scene.
I think you and I both watched Blast of Silence, right?
Yes.
Sort of a unique film noir that had him in it. And I've seen he was in like a series of comedy shorts, I think for Columbia Studios, because he and Shemp, I think, were in multiple ones that I've seen like back in the 30s. And it's just interesting seeing a young Lionel Stander.
Yeah, I'm having trouble imagining that, actually.
Because one of the things that stood out to me about Hart to Hart was its iconic theme song and opening, and just like that kind of gravelly voice, and sort of the Max persona and everything. So yeah, it was very jarring the first time I saw the Lionel Stander sort of doing like broad comedy, and kind of old two-reelers.
So for those who don't know, he's playing Max, the all-around manservant and friend to the Harts.
Yes, and I realize I just said broad comedy as if it's a big contrast to Heart, which, maybe aspires to a certain degree of sophistication, but I think one thing that people compare it to is The Thin Man, right? That's kind of like the goal. And it's not quite up on that level, and it's a little bit campier and more broader. So I don't mean to say that the broad comedy of the two-reelers was that far removed from Hart to Hart, but...
I watched an interview with Stephanie Powers, and she referred to the show as a fantasy, and I think that's pretty accurate. Mm-hmm. She's like, this marriage, but none of the problems. You don't have to worry about who's going to take out the garbage because there isn't any garbage, or Max is going to take it out, and things like that. And in a way, this was for that Pioneers of Television show. Mm-hmm. She was kind of maybe lamenting that some of that kind of element wasn't on TV anymore, which I can see.
Yeah, there's a place for this type of show for sure, and I think, to use a word that's common now that wasn't as common in this context back then, stakes. It doesn't have very high stakes, for better or for worse. Right. I think, and after kind of watching like a bunch of these, it's entertaining in its way, but it's also forgettable. And I think one issue I have, which actually I don't necessarily have with this episode, I think this episode is much better than a lot of the ones I've seen, but the mystery element, there's just not much to it. And a lot of times I think they take like an interesting premise and they don't really do very much with it, perhaps because they're spending more time on like sort of banter and like filler segments. And as a result, you don't get a lot of meat in the plots and stories. The stories are just sort of a framework for them to, wear funny outfits or glamorous outfits and kind of exchange quips.
Yeah, right. Yeah, even when their lives are in jeopardy, they don't seem to be taking it that serious.
Right, and it's not like something like Murder, She Wrote. You usually have like, there's sort of an effort to solve a mystery, whereas in Hart to Hart, of course, you see usually what happened a lot of times before they do, but it doesn't really take a lot of effort to figure it out or anything. It's usually that they come across maybe a murder or some, and get an idea pretty quickly, and then it's just a matter of how to expose them, and that usually leads to them putting on some kind of disguise or affectation or something like that. So it is very formulaic, but it does seem like a lot of times it sort of breezes by, and like, oh wow, we're almost to the final chase scene or the final fight scene already. It just seems to breeze by very quickly, for better or for worse, and that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's probably why Hart to Hart never really got critical attention, awards attention. I looked up; it was nominated for some Emmys. Lionel Stander won a Golden Globe, but I don't think it ever won an Emmy. It was never considered prestige television, and that's something. Some of these criticisms have been levied at all kinds of Aaron Spelling productions,
Right.
and maybe sometimes fair, sometimes unfair. In this case, it probably it was what it was, and it had a 5-season run and did very well for what it was doing, I think.
Yeah, and the other story they have a lot is the business rival or someone who tried to defraud Hart Industries and got in trouble, coming back for vengeance.
Yeah. And
The classic one that I know you watched, and I watched it because you told me about it, was his business rival hunting Jonathan as big game.
yes, the most dangerous game kind of plot, one of the classics.
I believe that the guy even says that phrase.
Yeah.
The two-legged kind.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like Hart Industries, again, kind of with the fantasy thing.
Yeah.
Every now and then we see him with like a stack of papers in front of him, but he doesn't seem to do very much work.
Yeah.
I guess he's a self-made, man, and good for him. I guess he's made enough money that he doesn't have to, to bust his tailbone all the time.
Yeah, he'll get on the phone and see how things are going. Plus, he's got, Hart Industries has its fingers in so many pies. How could he ever keep track?
That's true.
Or stay focused on just one part? Just from episodes I've watched or descriptions I've read, I know there's a chemical division, some sort of agriculture division, a toy company.
Yeah.
A psychic division.
Yeah. Wait, what? No, yes, that's right. Let me just say,
aluminum company.
Yes, and that's it's kind of like one of the things you roll with on the show, that in the episode with the psychic division, they don't present it like a big deal. It just is.
Right.
And they don't nobody within the show really bats an eyelash at the fact that they have a psychic division or an active.
It was sort of like a subdivision of some other, maybe at the chemical one again or something, right?
Yes.
And in again that the one where he gets hunted. So they buy this aluminum company, and rather than do what companies quite often do when they buy another company and lay people off and close plants, they're going to open more plants and employ more people.
Yes.
And apparently that's what he does every time.
Oh, talk about compassionate capitalism, huh?
Yeah.
It's amazing that Jonathan Hart has figured out how to make the system work for everyone.
Right, yeah. But still make money from it and live a glamorous life. I guess
it's
because
amazing.
he came, again, humble beginnings.
Yeah.
He knows the common man. Plus he has Max there to remind him.
Right. I mean,
I think Max likes the glamorous life even more than they do.
Yeah, I think you're right. He tends to indulge in earthly pursuits. There's a reference in this episode, but he also likes to put on the dog every now and then, I believe. I think that's fair to say, and he's still got the common touch as well, but he doesn't shy away from the comforts of life. I think part of the Jonathan character is in sort of that like dry businesses, sort of being bemused by things and trying to remaining humble and appreciative of what he has. And he does seem to treat other people very well. Both of them do, really. Now, now as far as Jennifer, she's, I guess, like some kind of international jet-setting journalist. But right. It seems like they established that early on, and then I don't know how much they stick with that, because I have not seen that referred to very often. I rarely see her doing any kind of journalistic work. Maybe referencing being a writer sometimes, but not actually doing anything.
I saw one episode that at the beginning she was interviewing a quote-unquote punk musician.
Oh.
But then she overheard some people talking about murder.
Ah.
They knows people they knew, and then they went to Vail to stop the murder. But I didn't know. I hadn't gleaned that detail that she was a journalist. So I had to put that together.
One would think that it's one of those things where they thought, this will give us excuses for story ideas and everything.
Yeah.
But eventually they realized, we don't need any more excuses.
Right.
They have this multinational corporation that has all these tentacles in it. That's enough.
One detail I like that came up in a number of episodes I watched is that she's fluent in Spanish.
Oh, yeah.
I like the fact that it came up in more than one episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because that made it not just seem like a convenience.
Yeah.
Like some of the corporation things seem like a convenience for, we have this idea for a psychic.
Yeah.
How do we get into that? Let's give them a psychic division. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think in real life she speaks multiple languages, like 5, I think I saw.
Okay. Maybe they incorporate it. I think I heard her speak French too. So
if anybody on primetime TV in that era spoke French, I think you'd have to pick Stephanie Powers as being, in your top 5 of people you would expect would know how to speak French.
Yeah. So in watching episodes in preparation, I chose a bunch of ones where they went to exotic locations.
Yeah, you can't resist the locales,
No.
the
Well,
glamour,
you know,
the travel.
you see a few where they're just in L.A. Every show was in L.A. back then.
Right.
I want to see, Vail.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, Hawaii, South America.
Yeah.
Now, granted, some of those were L.A. also, but
Hmm.
they at least pretended they were somewhere else.
Sure.
And that interview I was watching with her, she said when the show got canceled, she was in France filming a miniseries, and they had plans to film some episodes in France
Mm.
because she was there. But of course, that never came to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like they were caught off guard. I mean, Heart to
Hmm.
Heart didn't have a series finale. It seemed like it was not like a decision that they knew of ahead of time, and the show was still doing well in the ratings. I think when it was canceled, so
Yeah, just a change of something in the air at ABC, I guess.
could be. And you know what else? I could see this being an expensive show
Hmm.
because, like, kidding aside, they did do some location traveling, and you
Yes.
mentioned they had it planned, so it probably wasn't a cheap show to do.
Right. Yeah.
And who knows what was going on with Lionel Stander was probably making a fortune every year. He got more and more money, so
Yeah. But he gave it all away because he was a
yeah,
communist.
yeah, of course.
Of course. Maybe that was it. Maybe just that those last few years of the Cold War. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Can we have this guy on TV?
yeah,
He might have been a communist.
made it awkward.
Yeah.
He was re-blacklisted after 5 years of
Right.
on primetime TV.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted to. You know what? They wanted to. The show was canceled just as we were getting ready for the 1984 Olympics, which were held in Los Angeles, the Summer Olympics, and
Uh-huh.
which the Soviet Union did not participate in.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Connect the dots.
Oh.
I'm just putting this out there, so maybe somebody else can follow these leads, but
Right.
we might be onto something here.
Maybe the Harts can follow these leads.
They could follow the leads. They certainly would have the resources to do it more than I do.
I mean, their hobby is usually murder, but
Yeah.
it's not always murder.
If we could somehow add to the continual besmirchment of Lionel Stander's good name by tagging a decades-old murder onto him,
Oh, yeah.
then they might get involved.
I would never murder anybody. I can't do his voice justice.
Well,
Not without practice.
that's probably good for your physical well-being and your
Yes.
voice. That you can't.
So, should we start getting into the episode?
I think we should, yeah. And I think some other talking points we might have might come up along the way.
The episode called What Murder, or What Murder, from season 2 was recommended to us by our mutual friend Maureen. And she wrote a little something about Heart to Heart that she's been watching it the last few years, I believe, in reruns.
Yeah, and I guess she just kind of got into it, and I can see why. I can see how it would be a very kind of relaxing and just kind of a fun show to watch. But something struck me as very cool about that.
Yeah.
That was just fascinating. Like, whoa, you watch Heart to Heart, all the time. So yeah, but it's cool. She gives a good recommendation list of recommendations of episodes, and actually, she's already given us some that we've watched before.
That's right, the psychic
And
one.
I have not seen all the ones on this list, but I'm probably going to watch the rest of them at some point too.
I hadn't seen any of them, but a lot of the descriptions had stood out to me as I was paging through the descriptions on Prime. And anything that involves people getting temporarily injured
Yeah.
sounds appealing. Yeah. So you have that email.
Yes,
at the end,
and
right?
yeah, and I think maybe one of the reasons that her list resonates with us is because some of the things she likes about the show are probably some of the things that appeal to us. She said that her personal favorites tend to be ones that deal directly with the Harts, so not necessarily the nefarious doings of their friends and associates. Which I think I would agree with that. I do like the ones that it's kind of cool seeing a guest star or something, but really the core of the show is the relationship of the Harts. So I would agree with that. But she elaborated by saying, so what do I like about this show? Heart to Heart had it all: crazy adventures in exotic locales, charismatic leads, and a cute dog. But the show works best when the Harts' relationship helps them get out of a bind. It's comforting to know that no matter what happens, these two believe in each other and have each other's backs. Robert Wagner once described their relationship as them being on an, quote, eternal honeymoon, quote. And it's true. It's nice to tag along with these two on their wacky adventures.
And something she says in there about their, using their relationship to solve these problems is a difference between this and the Thin Man. Like, you never really see Jonathan trying to keep Jennifer from being involved in solving these things.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're doing it as a team.
Right.
Or one of the staples of the Thin Man movies is Nora getting involved despite Nick's protests,
Mm-hmm.
which might be just an element of when those were made. But
Yeah.
it did stand out to me, and of course, unlike Macmillan and wife, where again, that they had to find ways to get wife involved.
Yeah. Right.
Whereas here, it's definitely more of a team.
That's an excellent point. And every now and then there's a hint of maybe her being the one that drives them getting involved more often.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like he just indulges it and sort of like grouses about it. It's more like, yeah, sure, why not,
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, great, and but he enjoys it too. And I'm glad you mentioned that because it is kind of an equal partnership a lot of times, except when they get to the action scenes, and a lot of times he's the one fighting people and she's just kind of standing there,
Yeah.
maybe looking for a vase that she can pick up and smash somebody over the head with.
Right. Yeah. It's but her keen journalistic instincts.
Yes, of course. That's right. Yes, she can sniff out a story.
Yeah.
And I maybe I should mention this now. The Aaron Spelling book, it's an interesting read, but he only has maybe 3 pages tops about Heart to Heart. One of the interesting things he had in there was saying that ABC liked the idea. It was originally Sidney Sheldon had written a script years earlier that they sort of repurposed, and turned into what became Heart to Heart. But ABC thought they were too old. Not that they were too old as performers per se, but maybe too old for their lineup. This was late 70s, right? And they wanted them to be like in their early 20s or something like that. They wanted them to get much younger actors. And Aaron Spelling says in his book, can you imagine a guy being a millionaire and with a life experience to help people out like this being that young? It just wouldn't make sense.
Right. I like that they found a happy medium though between in their 20s and Cary Grant.
Yeah.
And I like Cary Grant, but in 1980,
Right.
and presumably the Jennifer would still have been much younger, which granted was the case of his real life, but and I seem to remember him by then like looking, I mean, still dapper, but looking old.
Yeah, I think the age difference is not distracting like it is in some other cases. And I also say, I think sort of like going back and looking and looking at some of the off-camera thing, I think they both went through these horrible experiences, and I think the Natalie Wood situation, which I don't want to get into in detail here, but
Right.
I think it aged him. I think like the first year or two you see, and then by the end of the show, I just think as it normally would. Plus, he was reaching a certain age, in real life anyway, and I do think just during the course of the show I think he aged.
But I mean, like the age difference between them is not huge.
No.
Whereas if it had been Cary Grant and Stephanie Powers,
Yeah.
although her real life relationship had a huge age difference, so
That's right. Yeah.
maybe she wouldn't have cared. It probably wouldn't have been her. It would have been someone else. But still, I think 40s and 50s works a little better for me than either 20-year-olds or 70-year-olds.
Yeah, or even like and thinking back to like the era of Cary Grant. I mean, he was in some movies, and I think that's probably one of the reasons he retired. It was just he thought he was getting too old to play those kind of roles. And I think of like Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn and Sabrina, or Gary Cooper and Audrey Hepburn in Love in the Afternoon. It just gets distracting at some point if there's too much of a gap, no matter how suave and debonair the male lead is.
Right. Who knows? Maybe they had a 70-year-old woman in mind.
Yeah, well, that could be.
Cary Grant and Betty Davis.
Wow. I would watch that, that's for sure.
That would be a different Heart to Heart.
Yes.
And, one more general thing, minor, I guess, disappointment is that given that this is from the House of Spelling, the guest star game is pretty low.
I think that's a fair point. And, kind of related to that is you notice that you don't see the cast at the beginning of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of these episodes, like, oh, this person looks familiar, and then you kind of have to wait till the end credits.
Yeah.
Whereas, many other shows, and certainly the some of the Aaron Spelling shows, they would declare right at the beginning who the guests are.
Right. Well, one episode I watched where they're on a train actually did have the guest stars at the beginning.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I think because it was there were a lot of cool guest stars. It was like, it was like a Love Boat kind of guest star. So it was kind of neat to see that. But but in a way, I would have enjoyed the surprise.
Yeah. And, Aaron Spelling did kind of pioneer this going back to like Burke's Law, with Gene Barry as suave and very wealthy head of detectives in the police force who would drive a Rolls Royce around LA and solve crimes. But the whole thing was like getting big stars to do like, just a little bit of work, show up for one episode. And then that kind of show became more prevalent later on. And Aaron Spelling, of course, was a master of that. But yeah, they don't really rely on that very often, Heart to Heart.
No, kind of wish they would. But, sort of I guess the big guest star here is, he's appropriately cast, let's say.
Yeah, and, in a show I mentioned earlier, Murder, She Wrote, is another one, like, that sort of would have a murder each week, but especially in the beginning, in the earlier years, would trumpet that guest cast as part of the big appeal, whereas this is more focused on the two Harts.
Yeah. So, when did this one originally air?
As you mentioned, What Murder is a season 2 episode. It was the second episode of the sophomore Heart to Heart season. It premiered Tuesday, November 18th, 1980. This was on Tuesdays at this point. It started out as a Saturday show on ABC following Love Boat, and everybody figured it would be a perfect match for Love Boat. And maybe it was, but can you guess what show replaced it on Saturdays after Heart to Heart moved to Tuesdays?
Fantasy Island.
That is correct. Fantasy Island, which is, if anything, a better fit with Love Boat,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So for the next 4 years, Heart to Heart pretty much was nested in that Tuesday 10 o'clock slot behind some comedies, some of which I'll mention in a minute. But it looks to me like it was kind of like a modest hit, like a top 20 hit, more or less, and a solid performer. But on the one hand, it had great lead-ins from like big hit comedies on ABC. But on the other hand, I don't think there were a lot of big mega 10 o'clock hits at the time, except maybe, some of the primetime soaps. So, I guess I'd call it a solid ratings performer. And it would go on for, 5 years, we mentioned 110 episodes, and actually it had 8 TV movies in the 90s, and I'd forgotten they were on NBC, and then there were several on the Family Channel, of all places, in the mid-90s. But on this particular Tuesday night, ABC had Happy Days, the season 6 premiere of Laverne and Shirley, which is notable because this was the episode where they moved out to California. It was followed by Three's Company at 9, and Too Close for Comfort at 9:30. Another one of Maureen's favorite shows, I believe. And yes, that was ABC, then followed by this Heart to Heart episode we're going to talk about. CBS had The Trial of Billy Jack, which I think was 1976, one of the Billy Jack movies, and that was all it had. So I guess it was presented perhaps unedited, or at
These
least...
things are epic.
Yeah. So a whole night devoted to The Trial of Billy Jack is interesting.
It was the Infinity War of Billy Jack movies.
Yeah, that's right. And NBC had something interesting I'll mention. At 10 o'clock, it was the Mandrell Sisters with guest Dolly Parton and John Schneider. Or actually, I believe it was called Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters at that time, which I'm still not sure how the other Mandrell sisters felt about that, but I guess they were making money, so they were fine with it. From 8 to 10, NBC had the Jukebox Awards. And I'll just quickly say the description I saw called it a broad-based musical variety program. And when they say broad-based, they weren't kidding. Let me tell you who the guests were, among the guests. Olivia Newton-John, Mickey Gilley, Billy Joel, the Commodores, Wayne Newton, Eddie Fisher, the Oak Ridge Boys, Chuck Berry, and Rosemary Clooney.
Together?
All in the same... Well, not in a duet that I know of. On the same program.
Yeah. I'd like to see that duet.
Yeah.
Eddie Fisher really stands out to me.
Yeah.
The most.
Honestly, I would have guessed that he was still alive in 1980.
Yeah. After recently hearing Wayne Newton on a 1980 countdown, top 40 countdown.
Yeah.
On Sirius XM, I'm less surprised.
Yeah, he was still relevant, huh?
Yeah. Wow, those really are. I wonder why they were awards.
Jukebox it seemed kind of flimsy. It looks like it was one of those just excuses to have a variety special.
Yeah.
Give out awards to anybody who would show up.
Right.
But yeah, what a jukebox that is.
I hope they had like jukebox theme, staging and everything too.
Oh yeah, like a giant backdrop.
Buttons.
Yeah. And maybe like some kind of spokesmodels or whatever, male and female, miming, choosing a selection before somebody comes out.
Yes. Yeah.
The big gaudy, graphic on the screen looking like an entry on a jukebox. Mm-hmm. It was a lower third to introduce them.
And a revolving stage that looked like a record.
Yeah, right.
We might have to see if that one's on YouTube somewhere.
Yes, I agree.
Wow, what a night. All right. How could you choose between Heart to Heart, that, and the trial of Billy Jack?
Well, fortunately, the Jukebox Awards did end at 10 because
Oh, good.
I slipped things around a little bit. The Mandrell sisters were on directly against Hart to Hart, so
That's bizarre too. Like, why would the Mandrell sisters? That's like an 8 o'clock show.
yeah, it really now it really seems to make more sense. You'd put the big special at 9 o'clock and lead off with the Mandrell sisters.
Yeah, maybe that was one of. Maybe there was a way to juice up an audience for the Mandrell sisters.
Yes, well,
You just watched 2 hours of music. Here's another hour.
let's give our standard disclaimer now, Mike. This is 1980 NBC.
Mm-hmm.
Any programming decisions
Yep.
are not ours,
Right.
and we don't pretend to know what was going on back then.
That's right.
And they probably did not work.
Yeah. So anyway, this episode begins after the standard intro. Now, we've kind of alluded to it, but the intro has a sort of disco-y theme song and Max narrating, telling us who everyone is. I kind of prefer the season 1 intro to the one they replaced it with, but mostly because in the first season, he's at the end, he says their hobby is murder.
Yeah.
And after that, he's like, when they met, it was murder. It's just not as good.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I didn't notice that at first. It took me a while to catch on that they had changed, slightly his voiceover. I think there's something else that's different in there too.
Yeah, I think a few of the little superlatives he gives. She's gorgeous. What a guy.
Yeah.
I can't even remember them all. That's not exactly what he says. But he's a great guy. I think that's... But it certainly, even if an episode is bad, you at least get that.
Yeah. I do love the theme song.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they're behind the wheel. I mean, it's got a lot of footage, I think, from the pilot.
Yeah.
Or at least kind of some of the early episodes. But there's definitely like a kinetic energy to it.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of that more action-y things.
Yeah.
Riding horses and running around.
Right.
So, but this episode opens with Jonathan driving through LA in one of their cars, a yellow Mercedes convertible, and he's on his car phone.
Yeah.
Sure sign of wealth back then.
It sure is.
He's promising he won't be late to this party, and he can't wait to have Marlene's souffle.
Yeah.
Which keeps coming back, this souffle, like a running joke.
Let's point out too that much to his credit, it's a big car phone, but he's not texting.
No.
He's talking, but he's not texting, so that's good. He's still attentive.
Yeah. He goes to an office building and goes into this office for a company called Trans-West Pacific.
Yeah. I like that. Trans-West Pacific.
What do you think they do?
Import, export?
Yeah, probably. He's going to visit his friend Drew, but Drew's not there. He has a little chat with Drew's assistant, which was kind of fun, and then didn't add up to it. I thought it was going to be part of the story, but it was just a nice little sort of, like, it was flirtatious without being in any way lascivious.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It's a friendly exchange that Laurie especially was stunned that it didn't become like a plot point or help establish an alibi for him later.
Right. And he's just like, okay, I'll wait. And he's just wandering around Drew's office and, picking up magazines, trying to figure out what to do. And there's a telescope, and he looks through the telescope, and it's aimed at an apartment building across the street, and there's a blonde in a nightgown, and he says, Alpha Centauri, I'd know her anywhere. And then he looks again, and she's arguing with a man who slaps her, and then or she slaps him, and then he hits her and strikes her with a metal sculpture of a bird.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jonathan runs out of the building and races across the street through traffic and crashes right into a guy driving a moped.
What a spectacular crash this is, by the way.
Yes.
I really enjoyed this. It's just something about the way it's shot. There's like a weird edit right before the impact, and it's not the smoothest thing, but, motorcycle pedestrian crashes rarely are, I guess, smooth.
Right. And the guy driving the moped, I like, he's wearing everything of a three-piece suit except for the jacket.
Yes.
He's got pinstripe pants and a vest, and he's a little injured. His arm is bloody, and he's full of he's not an old man, but he's full of old man observations.
Yeah.
Everyone's got to get somewhere so fast these days. And Jonathan offers to pay because he's all worked up about his shirt being ripped. And he's like, typical. Everyone thinks money can fix everything. But Jonathan is kind of dazed. He does offer his handkerchief to let the guy clean up some of the blood. And then the guy leaves.
Yeah, he didn't. Well, it's funny. He doesn't bother taking the money, but maybe.
Yeah.
But he has no. He's so self-absorbed. He has no interest in making sure that the guy he hit recovers.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a pedestrian. I mean, whether he was looking at you or not.
Right. Yeah. I believe he would still be at fault. I mean, sure, Jonathan jaywalked in an extreme way, but still,
Yes.
the odds are he's more injured. Then again, it was a moped, so
Yeah.
They might have been going about the same speed. And then it's nighttime, and Jennifer's at this party in a nice big house, and the hostess asks after Jonathan, and makes a joke about him dodging her souffle. And meanwhile, he's sitting downtown, just like really confused. And he fishes in his pocket and finds a note that has an address and a date and time. This old lady's walking by, and he asks her the date. And, she's sort of cranky about all that, but it matches the note, so he hails a cab. Back at the party, Jennifer is just called Max, and there's no word at home. And it's not like Jonathan to be late. No. He would call if he were going to be late.
And then, there's a moment in here, Mike, I just want to mention because it struck me as very weird. Like she says something like he had a few stops to make or whatever, and somebody says, well, some stops take longer than others, and
yeah,
it was almost like an implication that he was messing around or something.
Right.
But it was, I didn't quite get it, but I kind of got the implication, but it was just a weird comment.
Yeah, I feel like maybe just all these people want that.
Yeah,
They're
maybe
jealous of their perfect marriage, and I don't know which character made that comment now, but
I mean,
it was one of the women. But
yeah, I mean, maybe it was just busting her chops or something, and meant in a lighthearted way, but
it was weird though. So Jonathan arrives, and he's bewildered by the whole thing. Marlene, the host, makes a joke about some luscious blonde. So there's another one, and another comment that maybe he was distracted by another woman, and he has a little flash of memory, and that kind of is a running thing throughout.
Often accompanied by sort of eerie memory music.
Yes, eerie memory music.
Almost like we're watching In Search of all of a sudden or something.
Yeah. And Jennifer asks the housekeeper to get him a scotch and water, but he just wants water.
Which right away something's wrong.
Yeah. And she's good at, registering that she's concerned that something's amiss here. And she, does some little banter with him, and he doesn't seem to get it. And then one of their friends, a guy, invites him to play tennis. And again, he's just sort of out of it. And there was some joke about water polo that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
It comes down to the guy thinks he's drunk.
Yeah. Maybe we better. Yeah, there's something about we can invite the girls along and make it water polo or something. And
yeah, what does that mean?
I don't know. Yeah. I guess I'm just not made for the jet set, Mike.
Exactly.
I don't speak their language.
Right. I mean, Jennifer asks him what's going on, and finally he's like, he can't give her a good answer, and then he's like, "Who are you?" And in fact, he doesn't know who anyone is. Luckily, there's a doctor, Dr. Kendall, Susan Kendall, at that party, and she takes a look at him in a bedroom, and he's got a headache. He has a little bit of a flash of the accident and thinks he was riding a bike, and she had sent her husband, who turns out to be Drew, to get her bag, and he comes in and is like, "How you doing, Tiger?" And he looks menacing. He sounds menacing. He's that guy that played a general on the A-Team, right?
Yes, Jack Ging.
Jack Ging, yeah.
And he also had a recurring role on Riptide.
Probably as an antagonist there.
Yes, he was in lots of stuff throughout the 60s and 70s. And I remember him there was a show called The 11th Hour, a psychiatric drama that was on the late lamented Warner Archive Instant for a while. And I think they released it on DVD, and he was like a young psychiatrist, I believe, on that. But he is pretty menacing in this one.
Yeah.
like in a sort of like that sort of like middle class blandly menacing kind of thing, Like you could see him being like a corporate villain or just some kind of like sort of everyday guy or like a jerk neighbor, that kind of thing.
Yep, has a few too many. Maybe is obnoxious at the soccer game.
Yep. Yep.
And Jonathan has a little flash of the murderer, and it seems like it might be Drew. I mean, he doesn't. That's for the audience to notice. Then they take him home, and Freeway, their dog, is there, and of course remembers him. And Max comes out in his robe and pajamas, and Jennifer tells him that Mr. H has had a little touch of amnesia. And if you're wondering why we chose this from the ones recommended, I think there's your answer.
Yeah.
So we've done car amnesia before, so
Right.
and now people amnesia.
Yeah. We came close, I believe, when John Boy got hit with that wooden board.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But I always like seeing how the effects of amnesia and the extent of amnesia. Like what exactly a person will remember and what he or she does not. Like in this case, I was kind of hoping for like total hardcore amnesia where he doesn't remember like what a cab is,
right?
And or anything. But in this case, it's just some of these interpersonal details, like who he is and who everybody else is that he doesn't know. But he seems to be able to function at least.
Yes, it's high functioning amnesia.
Yeah, that's right.
And at first, Max is like grinning like just kind of like an idiot, like because he thinks it's a big joke.
Yeah.
They're getting back at him for something, but then he realizes it's true. Jonathan says he's tired, and there's a little bit of like sort of awkwardness about like how to say let's go up to the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think Stephanie Powers is good at that kind of stuff. At just seeming, I don't know, playing the awkwardness and things like that, and little bits of comedy.
It's an initial bit of it, but as the episode goes on, it becomes apparent that she kind of likes this.
Yeah, I know.
She's strangely intrigued by it.
Yeah, we cut back to Dr. Kendall and Drew, and they're on the way out of that party, and there's clearly some tension in that marriage.
Oh.
Marlene mentions that Jonathan, was saying stuff about some blonde in a window, and Susan calls it an hallucination. Meanwhile, Drew seems kind of sweaty.
Yeah.
That doesn't bode well. And back at home, Jonathan's in the bathroom trying to figure out... At first, it seems like he's trying to figure out what a toothbrush is, but...
Yeah, that I was so hoping he was going to say that. Like, what is this bristly thing?
Right. But he's just trying to find the right one. And, Jennifer comes in and points it out and then has his pajamas for him. And then she gets, again, kind of awkward. And it's like, well, these are yours, but, a lot of times I wear the tops. And then she's in bed reading and he comes in and he gets in bed and looks around. And I liked the way he said this. I do very well.
Yeah.
And amazed at his own life. And she's like, just about everything. And as it goes on, she says it's not every day that a man gets to go to bed with a total stranger who just happens to be his wife.
Yeah. Ooh la la.
Yes, and then as they often do on this show, they fade to black.
Yeah, and he's kind of like Jonathan is dazed throughout this, but
Yes.
I personally think it takes him a little bit longer than I would expect to sort of accept at least that this is his wife. I mean, because there's ample evidence. Everybody else seems to support it. As soon as they go home, they see a picture of them,
Yeah.
But I guess he's just still bewildered, and
Yes.
it takes him a while to accept everything.
He seems kind of innocent in a way, or naive.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is it takes him a little bit longer than I would expect for him to just say, "Look, I don't remember what's going on." Maybe he forgot what amnesia is.
Right.
I just realized it, that might be what happened. He really can't process it because he forgot about it.
Right. Trying to remember something.
Yeah.
I forgot something that I forgot.
Yeah. What's that thing that happens to you when you lose something?
When a bowling ball falls on your head.
Yeah.
I do question that, is it responsible to be engaging in marital relations when someone's had a head injury?
Well,
amnesia or no?
Yeah, you make a good point. I think that's a little bit better than some of what he continued, like driving and things like that.
Yes, there's the...
I guess, concussions were not treated as seriously as they were.
No.
Dr. Kendall, she gave a rather cursory examination of him, I think.
Right, yeah.
And probably should have been clearer about hey, just stay where you are, lie down for a couple days at least until the headache goes away.
Yes, lie down, but don't go to sleep.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the driving. We'll come back to that because that's a big one. But in the morning, Max is on the phone and he finds out from someone that the car's downtown. It has a ticket, but no damage on it. And I liked that while he was doing that, Jennifer was making breakfast. they haven't given up entirely on the normal life.
Yes.
Should we take a second to talk about their house?
Yeah, yeah.
I think you and I and Maureen probably all commented that their house seems a little modest.
Yeah, no. So apparently the exteriors they use are of Dick Powell's real life house.
Yeah.
Uh, so I hate to say this, but it doesn't really look that impressive from the outside.
No, it's just sort of. I mean, it looks nice, but like yeah, like a ranch house, ranch style house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a nice yard, and it doesn't look like the mansion of a self-made millionaire.
No, no, it doesn't. It maybe is has a little secluded, but and there's not. I'd like to see better shots of it of the exterior. Actually, now that I think about it, you know, a lot of times it's at nighttime and you see kind of like the same limited view, and you know, there's like shrubbery or whatever. You know, and inside it doesn't. It's not like palatial or anything like you said.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the main room seems kind of big. And,
Yeah, yeah. The main living area is the highlight of it, I think.
has a bar and all that kind of stuff. And,
Yeah, and when they have people over, they can show it off a little bit more, you know, and you see, okay, this is
yeah,
a nice place for entertaining. You know, it's not unmanageable, but you know, it's
right.
spacious.
And I think the kitchen probably by 1980 standards is pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
And just by today's standards, where kitchens are a little nicer, it probably doesn't stand out quite as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the whole thing seems like a very like a nice upper middle class house.
Right, and there's apparently a guest house that is referred to, but I don't know if they ever show that.
Yeah, have we ever seen Max's quarters?
I have not. I imagine it's probably a little bit better than Alice had on the Brady Bunch, but. I hope he has like his own restroom. I'm kind of wondering how many bathrooms there are in the place because it seems like one of those things where it would have been built before it became a thing to have, you know, plenty of bathrooms. So they probably have like, you know, in their bedroom suite they've got one, and I guess there's probably one in the main area.
Yeah.
Hopefully Max has his own.
I bet he does. They probably added. If he didn't, they probably added one.
I'm guessing they got like a half bath like powder room in the main area, and then Max has one, and they have like a full bath. I'm guessing 2.5 bathrooms, which is pretty shabby for the head of Hart Industries, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. But also from other episodes, it's pretty clear that Max has the run of the house, or at least the run of the downstairs.
Right.
He's quite often hanging out in the main room with Freeway, reading Playboy.
Yeah.
At least one episode he was.
Freeway was reading Playboy?
Yeah, Freeway was. It was weird. Playing cards. Also Freeway.
Yeah, right.
There's all the dogs over.
Yeah. Around the table.
Mm-hmm. That's where that painting comes from.
Jonathan had it commissioned.
Yes. Anyway, the other part about this scene is Max mentions that he found blood on Jonathan's handkerchief and suit, which we know is from the moped guy, but they don't know. So they take the Rolls. This is a bit ostentatious. They take the Rolls Royce downtown to pick up the Mercedes.
When you put it like that, yes, it is.
Yes. You know, Jonathan, of course, can't remember why he was there. And then Max recognized Drew's office building, and so they think it's funny that Drew wouldn't mention that he was there, but they go up to see him. And he said he had just missed him.
If I could just interject something, like, because you mentioned the blood, like there's sort of like a vague insinuation that maybe he had something to do with, you know, with a murder himself.
Yeah.
That he was directly involved in something, which there's really no evidence. I mean, it's probably more likely, I would think, to presume that he was in an accident. But they definitely showed, you know, like sort of, especially Jennifer, you know, kind of like her facial. Could he be involved? You know, in a different show, they would have explored this more.
Yeah.
You know, and like Lori and I were kind of thinking, well, maybe Drew would try to implicate him in it, you know, more directly. They didn't really expand on that, which is maybe a good thing, but there's just a little hint of it there.
Right.
Which is kind of weird.
I think Jonathan's maybe more worried than she is.
You know, that's a good point. Yeah,
because he doesn't know himself.
Yeah. Right.
But while they're talking to Drew, he has a memory and a feeling that something happened there. And then he says, "I saw you." And Drew, again, is worried. Meanwhile, Max is checking out, I put in quotation mark, birds with his binoculars.
Yes.
I mean, he certainly puts up a good front. He says he saw a scarlet tanager, but then a blonde rides by in a moped, which obviously is going to trigger some more memories.
Yes.
And Jonathan borrows the binoculars and walks down the street and looks up at the apartment building and recognizes a yellow umbrella on a balcony, and that's her apartment. And so they go in, and obviously his memory didn't fix the part of your brain that can figure out which apartment is on the inside from the outside. And he picks the lock. He
Yeah.
still has that.
Yeah.
They go in, he sees the bird statue, has a little memory flash. They find some possibly blood on the carpet, and then a door shuts in another room, and in the bedroom they find a guy, and Jonathan and the guy get into a little brawl, which was fun, of course. And then it turns out that his name is Bert Kroll, and he's the brother of the woman who's missing, who lives there. But he also thought she was looking for trouble by fooling around with a married guy. So they call some cops, and this really jaded lieutenant is there. Unfortunately, we only get the one scene with him.
Yeah. And, this is something that you and I I think, have talked about a little bit is I know that Lori and I have talked about it when watching the episodes is like the weird relationship they have with the cops. Again, it's kind of a convenience, but there's how many times in this episode, well, actually, this is less than other episodes where something happens and the first reaction should be to call the cops, but no, they run after them on foot or something like that.
Right, certainly that's what he should have done when he was in the office witnessing a potential murder.
Yes. And a lot of this is, I mean, just a lot of the show, that's sort of like one of the essentially ridiculous aspects of it is
Yeah.
they often seem to operate in a world where there are no police.
Right?
Like they solve the things themselves, they corral the suspects, and maybe you see the police get them at the end, but a lot of times you don't even get that. They just don't bother with it.
Maybe when you're super wealthy, that's what it's like.
Maybe.
Yeah. There are no police. It's a commentary on that was Lionel Stander's contribution.
Right.
But like this guy, he doesn't believe anything they're saying, and he's like, all I can do is file a missing persons report. And then they mention the blood, and he's just sort of like, it might not be blood. And Jennifer's, could you test it?
Yeah.
And he doesn't say yes.
He seems very put upon that she would suggest that he do his job.
Yeah. And then they go out, and this is the first driving thing, that they have 2 cars and 3 people, and Jonathan drives home by himself.
Yeah, I thought that was bizarre.
Jennifer should have been driving him, or driving that car by himself while he rode back in the rolls.
I mean, he doesn't have. Does he have GPS? I mean, I guess he knows the way home, or he
It followed.
paid careful attention. Yeah. But following sometimes in
LA,
traffic in that area can be dicey.
Right. I mean, especially with a car that everyone has,
Yeah,
like a Rolls Royce.
that's right.
Later, they're having dinner, and Jonathan's he definitely seems concerned about himself. I mean, concerned that he maybe did something, but also that he was involved with another woman. But Jennifer doesn't think he would do that. And then she asks, do you think you knew that woman? And you mean in a biblical sense? Like, in all senses. It's like,
Well, she trusts him, but she had to ask.
yeah. He kind of explains these flashes as he's having, but then he's upset that he can't remember things. And she's like, he doesn't have to remember anything except that she loves him. It's a nice scene.
It is. It's a nice, kind of a quiet scene that really works.
And then, in contrast, at Drew and Susan's, he's going through her medical books, and then she comes in and says she's going to the hospital, and which is clearly a point of tension because I guess she works a lot, and he wants to have her keys to her stash, and she's like, my what?
Yeah.
Stash. I have a headache. And she's like, yeah, I thought you only had those at bedtime.
Oh.
Yeah. And then she tells him to have an aspirin, but he's just like, her meds work faster. And says, I'm a big boy now. I have big headaches.
Yeah. The way he says that is one of the best lines of the episode.
Yeah.
He kind of shouts it,
Uh-huh. So she gives him the keys, and then he asks about Jonathan, and she says he's having some recall, and it probably means he's gonna make a good recovery. And then she leaves, and he goes in and finds the pills he's looking for.
Yeah, and then some. I mean,
Yes.
she really does have a stash there.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what a medicine cabinet right there in the study.
Yeah. Well, like maybe she has patients over, or has to fill her bag.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So the next day, Jonathan and Freeway are on the couch, and that's fun because Jonathan's, talking to him and saying, "Are you loud up here? You're going to be in trouble if I find out you're not." And later, Max comes in and shoos him away. And Jennifer's going out for errands, and so she leaves, and Max comes in, and it's another good scene. Like Max is telling him all the stuff they like to do together: play gin, play poker, watch the nags run, go to the fights, including Sugar Ray.
Yeah.
And they went to Philly to see them play the Lakers, which I assume maybe is the championships they're talking about.
Yeah.
He does an impression of Magic Johnson. I was talking about that they go back further than even before Jonathan had money or knew Jennifer. And he seems to have kind of, I guess, been some sort of like a surrogate father or something to him. I'd like to know more about that. I don't know how much comes out.
Yeah, I don't know either. Also, this is the kind of thing like Heart to Heart is a lighthearted show, but it's not a sitcom.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this case, it's not, because I was kind of expecting a scene where, Max made Jonathan do all kinds of things that he doesn't like to do just because he's taking advantage of him.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought at first that's what they were going for.
Uh-huh.
But it didn't really turn out like that. But it
Yeah.
kind of would have been funny to have a scene there of,
Yes. Going to burlesque shows.
Yeah. Oh, you love this.
Yeah.
I do.
Huh?
You can't get enough of it.
You love paying for it.
Yeah.
I also would have, you were saying that, and I think I would have liked to have seen a scene of him trying to cure Jonathan's amnesia.
Yes. Well,
like
having him
Beavis
stand upside down.
Yeah,
with a bag over his head.
Yes, like Butthead trying to pull to what was he trying? That Beavis and Butthead, where Beavis has some problem and they're trying.
He
has hiccups.
He does have hiccups. Yes, in there.
Right, but then they at one point doesn't he tie his tooth to a door?
Yes, yeah. Right.
Anyway. I'm intrigued by this Lakers game. Magic scored 42 points and Jennifer got thrown out of the audience for making unsportsmanlike comment in Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, yeah, how can you really have to be acting up to get thrown out of a game in Philly, right?
Yeah.
So this was probably at the Spectrum, home of the last Batty Awards.
That's right, yeah.
I hadn't realized that.
No.
Oh, good. All right, so this should be pretty... They've given us enough facts that we should be able to track this down, like on Basketball Reference, and find out which game Magic scored 42 and international journalist Jennifer Hart got kicked out.
Right.
I'll look that up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm wondering if it's the one where he played center.
It might be.
I feel like, Robert Wagner was probably a big Lakers fan.
Yeah, I could see him showing up at this.
Going up for him.
I'm surprised they didn't dramatize that in the first season of Showtime on HBO. It seems like that would have been a real high point.
Yeah, maybe there was a guy playing Robert Wagner.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean her getting kicked?
Yeah,
Yes.
all of it, yeah.
They just couldn't find a Lionel Standard type.
No.
But anyway, the phone rings and it's Drew, and he invites Jonathan out for a drink. And again, right after this moment of Max clearly being this important influence in his life, he just lets him drive off for a drink.
Yeah.
And they're at some place called Regan's Galley, like a seafood themed bar or something. And Drew brings out those pills and says Susan sent them along, and Jonathan, maybe you should go ahead and take one. Jonathan's a little concerned that maybe he shouldn't because he's drinking, but Drew's like, yeah, it'll be fine, it's just one drink,
just drink slowly.
Yeah. And then Jonathan's asking, how well do you know me, and wondering if he could cheat, and Drew's like, no, you guys have the perfect marriage, and this and that. And then Jonathan's vision blurs.
This is kind of interesting because here is where, again, I might have expected Drew to foster more doubt within Jonathan, but he's so confident in the plan that he's about to execute, which I believe is rather flimsy, but he's so confident, he doesn't even bother with it. He's just honest about that, and that's kind of an interesting moment.
Yeah. And then they go out to the parking lot, and Jonathan's pretty wobbly, but he's like, I'll be okay to drive. But while he's, I guess to help him cool off, Drew removes his coat and his neckerchief.
Yeah.
Jonathan, he might not remember who he is, but he still remembers how to dress.
Yeah, which has been evident earlier with the open collars and open buttons and the chest medallions.
Yes. And then Jonathan drives off, and I was like, well, this isn't going to go well.
No.
And it doesn't. Now, I've seen this same scene on Heart to Heart before, and another episode that involved him getting dosed with a hallucinogenic.
Really?
Yes, by the first clerk on Night Court.
Oh, really?
that actress. So anyway, and kind of same thing. He went careening through L.A.
Karen Austin.
Karen Austin, yeah. In this case, he's on a mountain road and comes very close to driving off that mountain road. Comes to the stop right at the edge of a cliff.
Yeah, shame on Jonathan for not just pulling over at,
Yeah,
any
right.
moment before this.
Yes, he shouldn't have left. He should have, I don't know, used a phone he had at hand
Yeah,
to call Matt. He probably didn't know his number.
it's weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he was the drug. He's dizzy and still not kind of in his right mind. But like we said, he shouldn't have been out by himself in the first place.
Yeah. Of course, I was also watching it and I kept thinking, well, why isn't Drew stopping him? And then, oh yeah, he wants him to die.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's weird because his plan is so particular that he assumes that he will drive himself
Yes.
and continue driving long enough to be in a serious accident that will kill himself and not other people.
Right.
Or I guess other people might be incidental for Drew, but still, it seems like there would have been I don't know. It seems like there would have been a better way to do this,
Like shooting him.
or anything.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, you say shooting him, but surely Drew doesn't just carry around a gun, does he?
No.
Okay, good.
I'm sure he doesn't. Yeah.
I just wanted to establish that, of course, there's no way that this respectable Trans-West Pacific
That's right.
leader would not be carrying a gun.
No, never. And at home, Jennifer and Max are worried, and Jonathan wakes up in his car. He has some more flashes, and he does the responsible thing, and he gets back on the road. Goes,
That's right.
So he goes back downtown, but he's starting the pieces are coming back together, and he goes into Drew's building and charms the custodian into letting him into Drew's office. At the same time, Max and Jennifer find the car downtown because she thinks, as she says, this is where he lost his memory. This is where he'll come to find it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
By restaging an accident with a moped.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping that was going to happen because...
You know what?
He goes up, he looks through the
Yes.
telescope, Jennifer's in the apartment, and then Drew walks up behind her and he goes running off again into traffic.
I hadn't thought of it, Mike, but Lori said the same thing, that she was really hoping that the same guy in the moped
Yes.
would come back and hit him from the other direction
Right.
at some point.
And Drew explains that he's in the apartment because he had brought those items of clothing to come and frame Jonathan. And he confesses the whole thing and then pulls the gun. So
What?
I guess he could have a gun. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay, I stand corrected.
Yes. And despite having a gun, though, he decides to take Jennifer up to the roof to throw her off and fake a suicide.
Yeah, well, it would have been too easy, to just dispose of her there.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
I guess, yeah. And of course, he thinks Jonathan's dead.
Yes, and to be fair, he is talking. He is telling us basically, like, talking through the scenario, like, distraught. Your husband has had killed a woman, and all this. So he's explaining the rationale for how it's going to look to everybody.
Yeah. So up on this roof, and there's a swimming pool there, and Jonathan arrives, and they have a big fight. End up in the pool, and then as Jonathan's climbing out, he calls Jennifer darling, and apparently he has his memory back. That's the sign that he has his memory back.
Yeah.
And then it ends as it often ends with a little pillow talk.
Mm-hmm.
There's a nice detail that she's now wearing his pajama top.
Ah, yes.
And he's showing off his hairy chest.
Yeah. One thing that's nice, Jonathan, when he has his memory of the accident and when he gets it back, one thing that's cool is that he has his memory of it in the third person, from our point of view.
Yes.
Like he has his other memories, which really clarifies things too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice when you can remember things.
I guess it was so traumatic it was like an out of body, like they say,
Right, yeah.
So
So yeah, all's well that ends well. I assume that Hart Industries takes over Trans-West Pacific as part of a deal.
And creates hundreds of new jobs.
Yes, in that office of two people.
Yeah.
They must have a warehouse somewhere where all the imports and exports come and go.
Of course, yeah, somewhere by the docks, maybe.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so all in all, yeah, I think, a fun episode.
Yeah, this is a good episode. One a little bit more, no pun intended, more sober-minded than some of the other ones I've been watching. the show definitely camps it up on occasion, but this one is played more seriously, and I think it works, and I think it indicates, of course we've had, some fun with a lot of the elements of it, and it is what it is as a series, but I think it does show that, when they kind of put their minds to it and sit down, they can be a little bit more serious, and there's a little bit more of the stakes in this one. There's sort of this interpersonal drama, and Jonathan's confusion makes for an interesting episode. So yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want this particular show to be serious, but it's nice to see a little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's like wanting to Love a Boat to be serious.
Yeah.
I think you don't go to Aaron Spelling shows typically for that.
No.
You go for a little bit of escapism, and hopefully they just handle that well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, I think because Jonathan was a little more vulnerable, I think that made him a little more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Than normal, where he's just
point.
sort of easygoing confidence. Well, he doesn't quite lose his confidence, but I mean, clearly he's confident enough to drive in all sorts of questionable situations.
Yeah. His swagger is slowed, but still there.
Yeah, and everyone else is good, and a healthy dose of Max. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he's really not too involved. He'll just pop in once or twice.
Right, and there's some other side characters, like I've seen a lot of Stanley, who seems to be like their financial tech guy at Hart Industries. Kind of an interesting, kind of a nice little side character. Mm-hmm. They've got some others, but really, yeah, it's not a show that relies on a big ensemble cast.
And some good Freeway's not always there either. So good to see him get a little action.
You get a couple of fight scenes. Mm-hmm. There's no one big epic fight scenes, but you get the long sort of, not car chase, but like a single car thing. So you do get some of the elements you're used to getting in Heart to Heart. And one thing I'll point out too is the episodes look great. I guess they were remastered for HD. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've been watching them on Prime. And now this one I think was in the correct aspect ratio.
Yeah.
Some of them they're not. They're kind of stretched, I guess, to fit widescreen, which is not ideal. But one thing about these episodes looking so good, I think, is it often exposes the use of the stunt doubles and some of the action scenes.
Yeah.
In a way that, if you were watching on, a 13-inch TV back in the day, you probably wouldn't notice. So buyer beware on that one.
Yeah, and I think maybe it exposes some occasionally production value issues, but
right.
Like you said, it's probably not a low budget show. And it was funny. And that the interview I was watching with Stephanie Powers, she was talking about like how the budget difference between an Aaron Spelling show and a Quinn Martin show.
Oh, really?
And because the Quinn Martin was operating independent of the studios, that they were often reusing sets between shows. And now I can't confirm, but I did watch an episode where they go on a cruise, and to me it seemed like they were using the Love Boat set. But
yeah,
I could be wrong. But or maybe they just used the designs.
Well, there was kind of like, and the whole Aaron Spelling company is a little bit complicated. Like this one was with his producing partner, Leonard Goldberg. Mm-hmm. But it was like the last one that they did together. But they had done a run earlier. But so Aaron Spelling was also producing other shows by himself at the time. And then they came back and just did this one. But it was unique at the time in that Aaron Spelling had this relationship with ABC where he was doing all these shows just for ABC.
Right.
So whereas, before you might be, spreading across different networks, Spelling had already established himself as huge producer and had multiple programs on ABC at the time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it would make sense for them to be kind of sharing resources among these series.
But different studios or distributors, at least now. Aren't they?
Yes.
Like Love Boat is.
Yes.
And is Paramount.
Yeah.
And this was Sony.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It was Columbia, which was bought by Sony, and Robert Wagner. I mean, Aaron Spelling mentions in his book that Robert Wagner was produced the TV movies. So Robert Wagner had a piece of this of the show somehow.
He's just a savvy businessman.
Yeah, he is.
He learned from playing a savvy businessman.
That's right. But yeah, and the show it's complete on DVD. I think it stalled originally from Sony, and then Shout Factory took it over. So it's never been more available than it is now. I know some of the free streamers, Tubi and Roku channel, have aired it in recent years. We mentioned Ovation. I think it was on Get TV, may still be. So there's lots of different ways to watch Heart to Heart if you're interested. It's easy to find now. Yeah, I guess I'd say I enjoy it. You kind of have to get in the mood and enjoy it for what it is. I do feel that like a lot of times the stories don't really take advantage of the premise. There was, like, for example, there's one where there's an exact double of Jonathan.
Uh,
Well, he's actually plastic surgery turns him
yes,
into.
right,
You know,
but it takes the whole episode.
yeah, and they don't they throw in like an extra elements that really aren't necessary. They should have focused on that and
Yeah,
try to have him deceive Jennifer.
right.
You'd think that would be the draw, but they don't. They throw in like a magic act and all this, and it's sort of like one of those things that it's cool that it's over the top and has these elements, but none of those
Yeah,
individual elements can really like stand out because of it.
that was why I watched it.
Yeah,
The episode description started with the possibility of a rare dual role,
yeah,
evil double, and I thought, oh, this is great, and then it took the whole episode. Now, I would have enjoyed it if it had just been the magic episode,
right,
but there was this promise there that it didn't get to.
right. With Harry Blackstone, which was cool.
Yes, yeah,
Who I'd totally forgotten about.
allowing himself to play a villain.
Yeah, I watched an episode recently with Stephanie Powers in a rare dual role,
Ooh,
and that I will recommend that episode. They do a lot more with that.
okay.
Jennifer gets kidnapped by people that think that she is, the other person, and they do a lot more with that, with the premise in that one. So
Okay.
I'll put that one in the show notes. I can't remember what the name of the episode is offhand,
Yeah,
but
yeah. There's some other ones I want to check out, both
yeah,
from the list we got and from again descriptions. I know there's one that I think it's the premiere of one of the seasons that shows how they met.
yeah,
That seems like that could be interesting. And
yeah. That's the one I've seen in multiple interviews that they did, where I think they both say that that's their favorite episode.
and because I chose to watch all these travel episodes, I didn't get much of them putting on disguises.
Ah, okay.
They did on the cruise one. They had aliases, and Max had an alias. Was doing an impression of an Italian industrialist, but
Yeah.
but like the credits in the later seasons show them in all sorts of like just like crazy costumes.
Yeah,
They clearly have a walk-in closet just for costumes.
right. Well, we haven't really touched on. I mean, I guess we sort of like got a. We talked about how they work outside the law, but
Yeah.
we haven't talked about another essential absurdity of the show, that a lot of times they will quote unquote go undercover, even though they're both well-known people.
Yes, right.
And maybe oftentimes not even bothering to alter their physical appearance beyond just putting on a costume.
Yeah, apparently they don't have much of a visual impact on the world.
No.
It's not like today. I mean, I guess they're billionaires now, but I don't know if I could tell you what Carl Icahn looks like. Is that his name? Is that guy still around?
Yes. I think
Guy,
he still is causing trouble. Yes.
Yes. But they're glamorous, so you would think. Just between the two of them, people would know. But there are, oh, so you're Jonathan Hart.
Yeah.
Or, there was one I watched where they're in Mexico and get mistaken for domestic help.
Ah.
And can't seem to get a word in edgewise. No. Our car broke down, that's all.
Yeah.
But then, of course, they figure out that a murder is going to happen, so they stick around.
You have to roll with it.
But if you have heart-to-heart memories, or if you want to tell us what your favorite detecting couple is, you can go to our Facebook group, join our Facebook group if you're so inclined, and just look for Battle of Network Shows on Facebook. We have a page and we have a group.
Yeah. We love talking about stuff like this, and you can go to www.battleofthenetworkshows.com to check out those show notes and a video playlist for this episode, as well as more heart-to-heart related stuff coming up in the next few days after you listen to this.
Yeah, and thanks for listening, and thanks for joining me again, RT.
It's my pleasure. This episode brought to you by the Hart Podcasting System, a division of Hart Radio and Television, a subsidiary of Hart Studios under the umbrella of Hart Entertainment, which is wholly owned by Hart Industries. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.